Good morning, everybody. This is Carrie Getz. Welcome back to another edition of this podcast series. And here we are talking to two wonderful women from Sabey Data Centers that's been kind enough to join us today. We have Laura first and then Kara. So Laura, I'm going to let you introduce yourself first. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, what you do?
I am Laura Freytag. I'm the Director of Operations Services.
Awesome. Kara?
I'm Kara Anderson. I'm the Director of Architecture for Sabey.
And so those titles are going to be probably nothing to most of the people listening. So Kara, we'll start with you this time. Kind of talk about what your day-to-day life is, what you kind of do in that role, and maybe a little bit about Sabey too, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess first of all, Sabey Data Centers is really interesting, and it's the largest privately held, or one of the largest privately held data center operators in the country. We have about 4 million square feet of data centers, 6 campuses and growing. So we're just a really vibrant company, really exciting to be here. I've been with the company for 16 years now. As Director of Architecture, I really tend to think the position as a builder of exceptional teams. I build project teams to build our projects, and it's professionals, it's all sorts of folks that it takes to get these things out of the ground. On a day-to-day basis, I'm doing things like working with our site team and site selection, due diligence, concept, design, entitlements. That means permitting for most folks. Assembling the outside resources, the architects, the engineers, all those other specialties that are involved in getting these projects done. So it's a really dynamic position, and it involves a ton of people.
Awesome. All right, Laura, how about you?
As the Director of Operations Services, me and my team support the operations team and allow them to do their jobs. I oversee our training and compliance and purchasing and contracts, security and safety, energy and sustainability, and our operations center, which is really customer focused and includes our remote hands team. And so to me, we're supporting our customer both internally and externally, allowing them to do their jobs.
And for those people that don't know about Sabey, obviously you guys are privately held. 4 million square feet, did you say?
Yep, right around 4 million. I think we've lost track, but yeah, we're saying right around 4 million. We're building every day, so it's hard to keep track.
Impressive. And are you guys all over the planet? Are you in the U.S.?
We're in the U.S. We have 6 campuses. See if I can remember them all. We're in Eastern Washington, in Seattle, in Texas, in Virginia, and New York. Did I miss anyone, Laura?
No, you got them.
There you go. Awesome. So let's talk about how you guys got into this industry, because there's not a whole lot of data center curriculum out there. Most people don't jump into this industry expecting to be in this industry. You sort of fall into it. So let's talk about how you got in the industry, what prompted you, how long have you been doing work in the industry, and what you really enjoy about it. And Laura, we'll start with you.
Okay. So I previously worked at a hospital consulting company as an administrative assistant, was looking to grow myself professionally. My dad actually worked for a data center and found an opening and said, you should apply for it. And I'd never heard of a data center, but I went for it. And that was 10 years ago. I started out managing the purchase orders and contracts and invoicing for the small team. It was probably 20 or so people. And I have just tried to find my way since then. And my existing role and my previous role never existed. So I've been able to create my role and find things that needed to be supported, especially around customer service and making sure their needs are met. And I just continue to try and take the things that I see a need for.
Awesome. And do you have a degree?
I do. I have my business degree and a master in leaderships.
Awesome. Neither of which are data centers specifically, surprisingly enough. we are working on data center curriculum, but we're not quite there yet, for sure. All right. Kara, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I'm a licensed architect. I've been practicing architecture for many, many years, over 25 years. And I worked with various other developers and not in the data center industry. And when I came to Sabey, like I said, 16 years ago, in fact, we really weren't heavily as invested in the data center world then. But it's evolved. The company's evolved into making that one of its main focuses, and so have I. I think it's interesting to point out that in the 80s and 90s, I mean, it was really a male-dominated industry, this whole tech industry, and now those guys are. And I was talking to one of my coworkers who pointed this out to me. He's retiring, and so many of these men they're retiring now, and there's a lot of opportunities, whether for women or young men, whatever you are, to really get in and fill some of these gaps. And there's a lot of growth opportunities, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I just read a study that said they expect by 2025 that there are 300,000 jobs in the data center industry that need to be filled.
Wow.
300,000. And that's not counting the gray tsunami they're expecting, which is all of us that want to retire at some point in our life.
Absolutely. And the new positions, and that's what Laura and I were chatting about, is just, we didn't have a director of sustainability last year, 2 years ago, and now we do. And like Laura talking about a lot of these other positions that have been created over the last couple of years, as customers get more and more, I mean, they know more and more what they need now, right? And so you really want to be customer focused, and so you kind of create these specialty roles. It's really interesting. It's changing so quickly. It's exciting.
To add to that, a lot of my team, those roles didn't exist 5 years ago. And so we have, created these roles and filled them to support the growing and changing requirements.
Yeah, I think this industry is very cyclical, and it does tend to repeat itself, but in an improved manner, right? New and improved comes around every 5 or 6 years, and somebody tries something different than what was done, a couple years prior. But it is kind of amazing how much the growth and how rapid that growth has happened. And so maybe talk about how that's kind of challenged you guys and what you have done to overcome some of that. Hey, by the way, we're just going to dump all this in your lap, sort it out.
Right. I guess I have a couple comments on that, because being in the physical building world, we're building buildings, and as we're building them, the design that we had maybe on the boards 2 years previously, because it takes that long to get these things built, as something might already become obsolete, or there's new technology. So talking about just how quickly things are changing and how we have to stay nimble and flexible, and that's what we really pride ourselves in, is just being able to pivot and get a team that's thinking in that way. I mean, we're currently implementing liquid cooling technology, or at least preparing for it in buildings that we did not have it designed in. And so we're midstream, we're in construction, and we're quickly redesigning and putting in some things to be able to accommodate that in the future. So things are changing so fast that technology is changing quicker than we can build. So it's a really, you have to be very dynamic and pretty nimble.
And Laura, what about you on the operations side?
We're trying to find ways to utilize software to support, considering that before adding additional employees, and reevaluating on every few years, is this the right product for us, or has something come out better and that would better suit our needs, especially as the customer requirements are changing and expectations with the operations team. We are trying to, use the right software to support those.
And that is something that's kind of tricky, especially when you have so much user input into what you're doing, into your space and everything, because, sometimes they have great ideas. Sometimes they do not, as we all know. What's some of the craziest customer requests that you guys have had?
Oh, boy. In my world, it's speed to market. I mean, timelines that are just completely, I don't want to say unreasonable, but makes us think out of the box and do some pretty interesting construction sequencing, because in a normal world you just would never be able to build a building in that time frame. That's what comes to my mind, because customers always want things just very quickly.
Well, that's a little difficult these days with supply chain, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a huge issue for us, as everyone's probably aware, but yeah, very difficult.
And then what about for you, Laura?
I think one that we've had to adapt is a very short notification time frame. We have one that is 15 minutes from an incident, and so we have had to adjust our processes and so that we can meet those timelines.
And then what are you guys finding for some of your older facilities when you get stuck in this cycle where something's been around a while, it might need a little refresh, or your customer needs have changed and it might need a little reconfiguration, maybe not necessarily updates. Are you guys finding that it's very difficult to have the time to do that, and to plan it properly? Because a lot of the customers that I talk to say, man, if we could add a month to any cycle that we have, our life would be exponentially different. But obviously, this industry doesn't quite work that way. So how are you guys dealing with some of the older facilities versus some of the new builds and trying to get those cycles going for your customers?
It's an interesting question. We are looking at a lot of those because we have a lot of old legacy buildings. I would say old, but older legacy buildings. It takes quite a bit of planning. As leases are coming to an end, we'll look at maybe shifting customers to a newer facility and then upgrading the older facility. But they're all so unique, very unique, right? We have older legacy buildings where we would like to just frankly take down the entire building and start fresh. And then you got to find a place for maybe some folks that are in there. And so it's a pretty complex issue. It's a good question.
Yeah, I do remember years ago, there's a data center very close to the stock exchange, and they were at capacity, and they needed to do some upgrades, and they raised everybody's rent 300%, and nobody left.
Wow.
They thought, well, if we raise the rent, they'll move, and that gives us money and it did not work that way. It is tricky. What would you say, being a woman in this industry, has been just something that was kind of hard for you to tackle? How did you tackle it and come out ahead? And maybe something that you sort of put into your everyday work life that has been really helpful for you. And Laura, we'll start with you this time.
I think for me, it's, kind of coming in with an administrative background is trying to, express through my manager and leadership that, like, I want to grow. I want to, be at the top. I need you to put the same that you would into me as you would others. My manager has been great and has supported me, but I also have taken individual initiative, which is one of our core values, and I encourage, the other women in our company to do the same. Gotta go for it. And if you see something, take it and, continue to push forward.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think that, we as women, we're not really raised, for lack of a better term, I guess, to ask for things. And it's difficult for a lot of women to go in at face value and ask for anything.
Yeah.
Right? We're just not kind of equipped that way. What about you, Kara?
My background might be a little different because I was really raised in a male-dominated industry, being an architect, coming out of school in the 80s. But I'll say, it really does matter who you're working for and looking for that right fit for you. Because, finding companies that value, you need to find a company that you agree with the values of the company, first of all. And, there's all sorts of things that can bring you to the forefront, and things like your problem solving skills and your ability to fit into a team, that is huge. I mean, being part of a team and being a valuable team member is as valuable as any other skill I can think of. And yeah, I mean, I guess, and the other thing I'll just point out is long-term relationships. Never underestimate those. I mean, it may be the most unexpected person in your life, but people do help you out in life, and they want to, and those long-term relationships are just extremely valuable. And here at our company, in fact, it's also one of our other core values, and we really work with people that we have known for many, many years, 50 years we still work with. So those are just a couple things that come to mind.
Those are always really good. Yeah, super helpful. I think, and that's come up on this podcast multiple times. You're kind of nothing without your network. And that is your support. That's your sanity. That's your...
Right. And it's really important to foster those relationships and don't undervalue them.
Mm-hmm. And so what would you say, as far as your network goes, that you think is something that is important in that participation role? Like sometimes people talk about being a mentor, and it's very difficult to have some mentees because they're not active, I guess, for lack of a better term. They don't really kick in as much as they should. And I think the same thing happens with a lot of women in the industry, especially if you're trying to figure your way around and figure out what you're doing. And so those networks become important, but networking with the right people, I think, also becomes important. So maybe speak to some of the folks that have made a difference in your life and why that was important to you and how that carried you through a little bit. Laura, we'll start with you this time.
I think of two women specifically. One is our Chief Financial Officer, Patty Sewell. She has, taken me under her wing in the past, over the past 10 years. And, for me to see a woman in that role, and being able to get to that role is amazing and shows me that I can do what I want to do as well. And then we have another person. She was a dean of multiple schools at a university I attended, and just was inspired by her and her ability to be at that level.
Nice. Kara, what about you?
Yeah, the women that she's speaking with have also affected me. I guess I'm thinking about people, and the one woman she was speaking about, finding somebody that makes you think about not only your work goals, but your personal life goals, and reaching out for those kind of trainers, for lack of a better word. Somebody who can make you think in that way, because if you're happy in your private life and you have those goals, then usually you can transition that over to your work life. So I think it's just a holistic picture of your personal goals. And then I'm just thinking about also, and maybe this is getting a little too specific, but I'm thinking about a woman in the office that somebody reached out to me to kind of help mentor her a bit. And, we deal with different things as women. And she was a young mother, and she was juggling so much and feeling overwhelmed, frankly, about, getting into the details of, she's in the office, she's pumping, she's juggling children's schedules. And she kind of reached out to me and said, how have you managed this in your life? At this point, I'm past all that. But we would go to lunch and just share conversations about, ways to balance some of that, and tools she could use to kind of get through some of those harder times. And she's still with the company, and she's thriving and doing well, but not being afraid to reach out to women for even those kind of more personal things, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I was kind of raised that work and professional life have to be separate, and you're supposed to have this big, wall of China in between the two. But it doesn't work that way in real life. If you're having a bad day personally, it affects your professional career. And I think especially for women, because we tend to be more emotional, I think, just by character a little bit, it's hard to have that separation sometimes, and that juggling does become difficult. But reaching out is so important, I think.
It is, and not being afraid to. And like you said, I always think women are the master multitaskers, and because of that, we always have probably 10 more things on our plate than we should, but we always find a way to get it done.
And recognizing that I'm not the only one who's gone through this. There are other, people, other women that have gone through similar things that I have as well, and to get that support.
Yeah, it is definitely different being in a male-dominated industry, I think, from just finding other women in the industry. I can't tell you the number of conferences I've spoken at that the line to the ladies' room was excessively short.
There you go. That's telling in itself. That's good.
Let's talk about time management a little bit, and that separation of personal life, professional life, and trying to fit it all in and juggle. There's no magic ball and no magic answer, because clearly every day is different and every day throws something different at you. But what are some of the tools that you guys have found successful, or some of the things that have kind of helped you out so far?
I don't know if I've been successful yet. I work out at 4:00 in the morning because that's the only time I can go to the gym. I end early so that I can also be there with my daughter when she gets home from school. And I think it kind of changes year to year what comes up. So finding the different tools to help is hard.
What about you, Kara?
Well, it's a good point. It's definitely changed what that looks like over the years as you have children, different ages, et cetera, if you're traveling for work or not. For me, it's huge to build a network isn't even the right word, but people that you can reach out to when you need that extra help during the work week. I mean, things, to Laura's point, things happen, right? It's a neighbor that, the dog's been in the house for 12 hours. Can you please let him out?
Mm-hmm.
If it's somebody who can run over and pick up the child from school if you have to, but having that support system, and it's not always easy to build, but you it's huge, and it's a peace of mind when you get stuck doing things, or your a meeting goes long or what have you, because you can't do it all by yourself. It's really
Flight
important.
gets canceled. That was
Yeah,
usually mine.
exactly. Flights gets canceled. You're traveling.
By the way, you're not going to be home till tomorrow. Wait, what?
Exactly. But you have those three people, okay, da 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 da, and people, that will jump in and give you a hand, and people are usually just happy to do it.
For
I want
sure.
to add to that it's very easy for us as women to think that we have to do it all ourselves. Recognizing the need to get that support, as Kara mentioned. You mentioned it, and I do have that support, and it is very helpful that, hey, can you go pick up my daughter after school? I'm stuck in traffic or I'm running late. So we need to ask for help.
And I will say too, I think probably the only good thing that came out of the pandemic is that companies have realized that women can work remotely. And I would say that for years, tech did a very sorry, horrible, no good job of using tech to help solve some of the problems that women in the industry had. There's no reason that you should not be able to work at home if your child is ill. There's
Mhm.
no reason that you should not be able to leave early for doctor's appointments or visits for your child. And I think that the good thing that came out of COVID was just that it brought a humanity to people. All these Zoom meetings, people realized, oh, hey, they got a kid. They just showed up at this meeting. Shocker. So,
My daughter's a regular occurrence in my meetings.
yes, you did.
No, we talked about that at our company, how that really was a catalyst for us to get our technology, just like you said, our meeting technology launched and up and going very quickly, and it really has been helpful, to your point.
And I think too that a lot of companies, I would say a lot of the data centers that I talk to, their support people are predominantly remote because they found out nobody's late for work when you work from home. That it's hard to say that you got in traffic between the bedroom and the office, right? Or the bedroom
Mhm.
and the living room. And a lot of those jobs have stayed remote, which I think is really handy for military spouses, women that do have special needs kids or need to be at home. I mean, I think all of these avenues are available now for women that were not even probably 3 or 4 years ago.
And they can still be just as effective as if they were in the office.
Although I will say there are some companies that are diehard. You will come in and you will work here all the time, but I think that's more in response to the quiet quitting problem that has come up as of late than people actually being able to do their job and do their work. So what would you say, just because I think it's important for women to know, how other women are dealing things, what is on your plate right now today that is your biggest challenge, and what do you think it's going to take to solve that?
Work or personally?
Either.
I think for work-wise, we mentioned the growth that we're experiencing and planning in the next few years, and it's trying to support and ensure that our operations teams are prepared for that, and we as leaders can support that growth. Personally, it's just meal planning.
The age-old problem.
Oh gosh. I guess I would say just from a professional standpoint, or I should say industry standpoint, is power. I mean, we're in markets where we're seeing that the utilities are having a hard time, or will be having a hard time soon, providing power. It's affecting so much planning, investing. How do you plan for projects when you can't be assured you're going to have a certain amount of power? Now, I think we do an exceptional job of our relationships with the utility companies and getting commitments, but just as an industry, it's going to be an issue. We're really going to have to start focusing on alternative energies. We know that the nuclear, energy is happening, but it's still in the very, infancy and kind of just prototypical stage. So we need to move that along pretty quickly if we're going to continue to meet the demands of more data, more data, more data, and it needs more space. So yeah, it's top of mind for us all.
Yeah, and that is a problem industry-wide, without a doubt, and it's certainly getting a lot of focus, and I think it's going to get a lot more focus when they start trying to tax carbon and some of the other things that I feel are probably coming down the pike. But, speaking to that sustainability, everybody wants to get there, but we're not there yet. And I think that there's some really, really terrible misunderstanding about where we are as far as being able to support that and the amount of land it requires, the amount of resources it requires. There's a ton of renewable energy that's built that's not grid connected yet. And so from a power perspective and building in some of these crazy cities, what are some of the things that you look for from a technology standpoint when you start evaluating technology? Do you pull vendors in? How do you go about that cycle? I think that's important for people to understand too, to get new products on board, especially the new stuff that nobody's tried yet.
Yeah, I would say that, we're pretty focused on meeting, client specific needs. And so it's almost like you have to build an entire team just to kind of be able to focus on that. And that's probably the thing that's slowing down the industry in that regard. But we certainly have our partners, our design teams, that are mechanical, electrical teams that we pull in on a regular basis to kind of talk about, new prototypical concepts and infrastructure and how we're going to attack this. But we've certainly gone through some modeling on some large pieces of land in other states. And to your point, things take a lot of land and they're not very efficient. And we've chose not to move forward with some ideas. So it takes a lot of analysis, and it's a complex problem.
It is. And in tech, it's always crazy because, it's that next new greatest thing that's going to fix everything. And then nobody wants to be on the bleeding edge or the leading edge. They want to wait, especially in this industry, because it's so risk averse.
That's right.
That a lot of new technology, I think, doesn't come online as fast as it could just because of that risk aversion.
100%. Yeah. Yep. It's a great point.
Awesome. So as far as outreach to younger women and women that are trying to start out in the industry or thinking about a career in the industry, where are some areas that you would point them to, or some recommendations that you would make as they go along their journey, starting whether they go to school, don't go to school, try an apprenticeship program, whatever their interest is? What would your recommendations be for coming into the industry?
That's a great question. I think it's easy to think of data center as just like the electrical and the mechanical side of it. It's so much more than that. I mean, me and my team, we don't do any of that. So, looking at the other areas that can go into operating and supporting the data centers.
Yeah, and I would say that so many of these positions evolve into other things. I mean, if you're interested in the industry, take a security job in a data center and learn how the data center works in that regard. And more than once, we've had folks move up from a security position or from other, to Laura's point, many types of position that maybe end up more on the technical side. So, or not, but they're supporting the technical side. So it's just, there's so many avenues. Whatever your interest is, I think it's perhaps reaching out to, keeping an eye on these companies. They're all growing so fast. There's a lot of positions that don't need to be technically based.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of companies working on internship programs too to bring people into the industry, because all of the jobs in this industry don't require a degree.
That's
without
right.
a doubt.
Yeah. No,
and so I think there's plenty of places where people have an on-ramp into the industry. Like you said, start somewhere and then see what interests you around you. But I would say this, considering the attrition rate for women in this industry, which is deplorable, by the way, it was 67% before COVID. I don't know what it is now. I'm kind of scared to ask. But what are some things that you would recommend that women starting out, because it is still a male-dominated industry. We haven't solved that problem. We're nowhere near close to gender parity. But what are some things that you would recommend to a young woman that is at that frustration, my head's about to explode point? What are some of the resources that you would suggest for them, or some tools or some things that you've personally done to help get over some of those frustrations?
I would, I can think about some folks who've been in that position, and I think finding, first of all, inside the workplace, if you are somewhere, trying to find that person who can be your champion a bit and speak out to others, because I've done that for people, and it's amazing how that changes their career trajectory and their outlook on their job. If you can find that person that believes in you at just, maybe one person that you have that conversation with, that you guys click, and they can have a conversation with somebody who therefore may lead a path for them. So I think really trying to find that champion and that partner is really important.
I think also trying to find, the things you are good at and passionate about. And if it's what you're doing on a day to day, or it's not what you're doing on a day to day and you're frustrated, then it's probably worth looking, even within the company, like, hey, this is something else I'm interested in. Would you support me looking that way? Or finding something else.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of women are really afraid to do, because you're scared to be without a job. And if it gets really bad, I know a lot of people that have stuck it out way longer than they needed to, just because, especially in a small town, if you don't have as many options as you would, say, in a Loudoun County or a New York City or some of those places, it's kind of difficult to take that. And I think it's important to find somebody you can just kind of unload on.
That's right. Yeah. And as far as tools, just thinking about, going to industry events that are, a lot of those things don't cost money. Reaching out to, maybe if you're in a smaller town, the economic development office, and talking to those folks. They see people coming in and out of town and know what industries are coming in town. And a lot of times they know somebody's coming in, and maybe volunteering, at some place like that where you have the inside leg on who's coming into a region could be an interesting way, just thinking out of the box, because we meet with all those folks, right, on a regular basis. And so thinking about, that's a great opportunity for somebody to meet with people who are coming into these regions and to new cities.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think too, sometimes you can look at some of the events that are happening and look at the sponsors for the events, and that gives you kind of an idea into a lot of the vendors that support those. And there's a lot of people that have started in this industry by working for a vendor, and then they've made their way into the data center proper.
That's a great point. Yeah, vendors are a big driver. Yeah.
And also, too, I think, especially if you're going for one of those roles, it does require an education. It's important for young people to understand that a lot of these companies pay for your college. And so, if you start somewhere and you decide that college is your path and that's the way you want to go, or it's important for your job, or that's what you want to do, in a lot of cases, you can do that and have it be fully paid for by the company that you're working for.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know that talking about just curriculum, and know that we're really active in Eastern Washington, helping write the curriculum for the industry, some of these community colleges, and to your point, getting folks fed through that system. So a lot of interest in the industry to feed people into programs.
Awesome. So we are butting up a little close to our time here. But I will ask you, ladies, on the way out, if there is some parting words of wisdom that you would give to a young woman starting in the industry, what would you say? And Kara, we'll start with you.
I felt like I offered a lot of my words of wisdom earlier, but I just would say that look for values that you agree with in a company. Look for values that you value in other folks, and don't underestimate those. And hard work is just, don't underestimate what just putting in the hours and the legwork can do for you.
Perfect. Laura?
I will reiterate what you said. The culture of a company is very important, and ensuring that it aligns with your values, and, take the initiative. You don't know where you'll end up, but if you keep going, you'll end up further than you were.
Got to start somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't start, you won't get anywhere.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, ladies, thank you so very much for your time today. For all of you listening, please check out the book, Jumpstart Your Career in Data Centers, and check out Sabey Data Centers for jobs out there. Look at their job board too. And certainly you can reach out to me, and we look forward to hosting you on another edition of this podcast. Thanks for listening.